Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here. So thank you, TiE Kerala. Thank you, Wen, for having me here. I can't remember the last time I addressed an audience which had as many women. It's wonderful. I must say, kind of a little intimidating as well. But for multiple reasons, feels very special to be here. Coming to Kerala and every opportunity to be here is something I've always loved. It takes me back to my roots. Truly God's own country. Love the opportunity. Sitting there in the audience, I almost had forgotten that I was meant to come up here and say a few words as well. Listening to Aruna ma'am, her years and years of experience as an IAS senior officer, listening to a very creative individual and listening to Anjali's experience kind of makes me think, what dimension should I focus on? But what I'd like to do is, the topic given to me was about high performance individuals. And what you did here was a little bit of introduction, but I'd like to kind of tell you my little story, because I'd like to believe I kind of took not the normally treaded path and did a few things a little differently, which may have been, I may have thought about it a couple of times then, but on hindsight has always held me extremely well. So to give you a little context, and I say this while I know the theme is high performance and it is gender agnostic, cannot help it given the number of women in the room to talk a little about my story, because and hence talk a little about what it meant growing up to where I am today. So I'll keep it very brief, but the older of two daughters was born and brought up as the son of the house, came from a business family. My father was a businessman, so was always groomed and brought up to be someone who would take on his business. A mechanical engineer is who he was, and then somewhere along the way he figured that this girl isn't going down that field. I did go down the engineering route, actually went to VJTI in Mumbai and pursued electronics engineering way back then, and I graduated in '93. But engineering, I was a class of 13 girls out of a whole batch of 350. So we were less than 5% of the population. When I look at where I am today, I sit in one of the leading global accounting firms in India. We're 350 partners and we're about 20 women. Ratios haven't changed that much. I still am in the minority. I feel that even then. But yet, and one of the things I'd like to call out, I don't believe it's only in recent years there's so much talk about diversity, about inclusion, which is fantastic. For the most part, never really felt in the minority, have always, like I said, thanks to that upbringing of being brought up as the son of the house, did everything my way, have had a certain aggression and pursued my career with a certain aggression. Having come from engineering taught me a certain structured way of thinking. I joined a firm called Arthur Andersen way back then. I don't know if people here have heard of it. It's now spoken of in history books, but a wonderful organization which packed up like a pack of cards thanks to the Enron scam way back then. After engineering, actually, my plan was to go work for a year and then, just like my father had aspirations to say, I'll go down the business route and set up my own business. So let me work for a year, then go do my MBA, and let's see where life takes me. A year at Andersen, absolutely loved the work experience and the exposure it provided me. And after a year, my boss way back then said, hey, you know, if you want to do business, you must learn a little more about finance. Why don't you try doing your CA? Seemed like a pretty bizarre suggestion to tell an engineer that you should go do your CA. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you know what, you're going to get 2 months of leave. Go study for the exams and let's see where that goes. I said, okay, you know, I actually wanted to learn some bit of accounts and finance so I can pursue a business career, so why don't I try that? So went and gave that a shot. I actually cleared my inter-CA. And then it almost seemed like, hey, alongside work, an added degree wouldn't be bad. So I continued working, continued in the consulting field, and that's where I jumped into business consulting, a field that is probably the only field I have known, but one that has kept me going for over 20 years. A field where every project, every assignment brought with it variety, brought with it new challenges. It was in different sectors, different kinds of companies, working with promoters who were absolutely passionate about their business, to working with large global conglomerates where it just takes a whole different ball game to change things. So did that for a long, long time. And then 20 years into that space, and I am obviously going to give away my age, but few years ago, when I turned 40, there was that bit of an urge to say, when I retire in 15 years from now, perhaps, do I want to look back and say, I only did consulting? Maybe I need to do something else. And actually, that's when our CEO suggested to me, and he said, we're looking for one of our line partners to come and run the HR function for our firm. And yet again, and the reason I call this out is it was to me yet another turning point in my career, because an engineer CA, if that wasn't enough, here's someone now telling me to do HR. And I was kind of, that it doesn't get more strange than that. But like I said, I was looking to do something different. In fact, I was on serving garden leave. I was at home exploring some fantastic ideas to set up my own venture, which is when this proposition came through. Initially, I said, no, I'm not an HR person. I'm not a trained HR professional. Why would I want to do this? But I spent one weekend mulling over it, and then it occurred to me. I said, where else am I going to get an opportunity to head human resources for a 22,000 strong organization and actually get to learn HR alongside? Who's going to give me that kind of an offer again? And what do I have to lose? So I jumped into that role, headed HR for Kpmg in India. Like I said, we were 22,000 people, a fairly large organization. I had a team of 250 HR professionals, all of them from the choicest of organizations and B schools, the only non-HR person in their midst. And I actually headed HR for a span of 5 years, did a bunch of things differently. Probably the highlight of my career, because it was learning and putting to practice. Have any of you all interacted with consultants? Any? Show of hands here? A few. There are lots of nasty jokes that go around, right? Around consultants about how we take your watch and tell you what the time is. In the HR role, I had the opportunity to be at the receiving end. I had to design my own changes and feel the results of it then and there. If things I restructured and redesigned went well, my employees would absolutely go crazy with compliments. If something didn't go well, you knew it then and there because they'd tell you. So in those 5 years, sitting on the other side of the table and experiencing what that meant, and to be able to influence an organization that I was part of, but sitting in one little P&L, this role gave me a vantage point to feel and experience and make a change in this organization at a very, very different level. So I'm not getting into that. This is not about the HR role. The point I would make is that, and after that role, where I am today is I'm back in the business. That's where my heart belongs, being with clients, solving real business problems. I'm now the managing partner for our business in Bangalore, which is one of our largest offices. And back with clients, which is what keeps me energized and kicking. In this long story that I kind of may have taken a bit longer to narrate, there are a couple of points that I want to call out, which is to do with what I would define and what I'd like to believe define and make high performance individuals. And the first one really is to embrace change. Every time one sees a new opportunity, the first reaction is to actually say, but everything's going okay, why do I need to do something different? And quite often those opportunities go right under our nose and we don't even realize it. Actually, one of the quotations that I very strongly believe and live by is comfort zone is a beautiful thing. Do we recognize it in the audience? Do you know what that comfort zone feels like? Yeah? But nothing really grows there. That's the second part of that quote. And which is very, very true. You could drift along and do what you're doing in that happy comfort zone forever, but nothing really grows there. You want to see real growth, real success, you've got to embrace change and do something very, very differently. So that's really the first piece that I would talk about to say as one tenet that has kept me going. The second bit is to stay really relevant. If you look at the corporate world today, things, and just to give you again in the context of that story, when I did HR over those 5 years, I was away from the market. I was in an internal role focused on my people and getting my organization right. It took me away from the market. When I got back to business after 5 years, guess what? Half the solutions we were selling did not exist 5 years ago. Suddenly, I found myself in the world of cyber security and robotic process automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning and who knows what else. And those were not solutions that were even prevalent 5 years ago. And that's the pace of change. I mean, I'm sitting in one organization, moved away, but felt like I had landed on another planet. And that's what taught me the need to stay relevant and to constantly upskill, which is, in my mind, a second very, very significant piece if you want to be delivering high performance. How do you really, really stay relevant? Extremely critical. And the third, really, in my mind, is to seize every moment and every opportunity that comes to you. Carpe diem, which is a beautiful saying, which is really seize the day. Make the most of every day. So those are three things that came in my mind when I was kind of thinking about what should I focus on in this session. But what I'd like to do is, with permission from the organizers, steer a little away from just the high performance part and talk in 5 minutes on what I think is very topical in this room today. You've heard elements of inclusion and diversity get spoken of. We've all talked about what it takes for women to be successful. There's a lot of attention on the subject today, but yet we're grappling with ratios. We're grappling with numbers. I just told you, we're about a little over 20 women amidst 350 partners. That just gives you a sense for how there is still a problem that we need solved. The good part is that corporate India is recognizing it. There's a lot that is changing. First of all, a few years ago, we spoke of just diversity, if you recognize. Inclusion and diversity is a more recent terminology by itself. And like one has read, it's truly, when we say diversity is about being invited to a party. And inclusion is about being asked to dance. Think about it. Diversity is about having the ratios and having the right numbers. But inclusion is when you're truly making someone feel inclusive, when you are actually making it a level playing field. And I do believe we still have some way to go in terms of making some of that happen. We've come a long way, but a lot has yet to change. If I talk about organizations and Kpmg as well, on the policy side today, we've done a bunch of things. We have agile working, we have part-time working, flexible working, maternity leave, like you know, now is 1 year off. People actually get 6 months and another 6 months. I wish I had that. But look at what has changed. And yet, let me tell you the downside of it. We have the Maternity Act itself, to be very candid, has been a bit of a spoke in the wheel. Because people are thinking, when you're recruiting, recruiters are, oh, if I have to go and now pick women, that means that's 1 year's already gone away. There is a bias that still exists. We've all heard, and there's a lot that has changed thanks to POSH, the prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. A lot of good stuff done there. A a lot in terms of sensitization across the workforce, making women feel more comfortable, and I have seen progress. If I look at hotline complaints, escalations we had a few years ago to where we are today, the sensitivity levels have really, really gone up. But what else is Posh doing? When a young manager wants to now recruit for his team, it does get him to think twice. Oh my God, who should I actually pick? Here are two people, a male and a female candidate, equally well qualified. Here is one who can work for me till 3 a.m. and here's the other for whom I'm going to have to figure out how do I drop this person home and make sure everything is okay. Here's one for whom I can use cuss words if I'm stressed, but here's another who if I say the wrong thing, I'm actually going to get penalized under the Indian Penal Code because it's a criminal offense. What is that doing? That is creating some pressure. Now, why am I talking about this? Because when we've spoken about inclusion and diversity, and if I look at some of what we've been talking about here, very important to recognize where corporate India is. And there's a lot that we are all working very hard to change. Those ratios, by the way, really need to move up. And which is why some of what you all are doing together here at WEN is, I think, fantastic. And I was chatting with someone in the audience and got to hear about the groups that you all are creating and the forums you all are creating. It's a movement, and I'd like to see this across, TiE support this in all of their chapters, actually. Because there's a long way we still have to go. At Kpmg, we have a close to 50% ratio at entry level. No problem there. In fact, on a lighter note, a few years ago, we launched something called a purpose campaign, which I'd love to talk about, but I don't have that time. It's about getting our people to recognize what's their purpose. Why do they come into work every day? What brings them in? And when I asked that question, some of our youngsters said, we actually come to find a life partner at Kpmg. Which I thought was very naive and cute. While many said, oh, we come for CV, we come for experience, we come for the salary, there was a bunch who said, we come to find our life partner, which was as candid as it could get. And that's the ratio we have. We are actually a very nice grooming ground, 50% ratio at entry levels. As they get to manager, senior manager, director levels, those numbers drop off the cliff. Because that's the time when women are either getting married, starting a new family, settling into a new household, and that's where we struggle to hold them. There is no policy we have not implemented. There is no model of flexibility we have not provided. But yet, and that's the part I want to kind of talk about, is so much depends on the will of those women. How badly do you really want that career? How ambitious are you? Are you willing to drop that at the first cry of a baby or the first taunt of a mother-in-law? How ready are you to actually say, I want this? And yes, there are going to be phases. Like we heard from Anjali, and we've all gone through that. I still have women who've come crying into my room to say, I just found out I'm pregnant. And they're crying because they know what's going to happen or what they think is going to happen to their promotion that cycle. This is real corporate world. When I had my baby a long time ago, I still remember feeling terrible because my peers were getting promoted and I knew what that meant for me. Peers, colleagues who I had worked with 15 years, when one of my peers made it to partner, and he made it to partner, I think 2 years ahead of me, it hurt. It really, really hurt at a certain, because I had that aggression, ambition within me. And I remember I was young then, so I would say I said to him, oh, but I got promoted in a very different way. And he looked at me to say, what do you mean? And I said, I got promoted to being a mother. You're never going to know what that is. and that was out of spite, actually, way back then. But when I think about it, what motherhood gave me, truly he's not going to experience. And I had it in me, and I remember saying this, that I'm going to get back and I'm going to make sure I'm going to get past and outdo someone else. And that's really how I have looked at it. And when I look at my journey, I really believe this corporate career and all of this, it's a race of many, many laps. And as women, there are a few laps that we may have to sit out of, which is fine because there are other priorities. But if you're competent, if you're willing to embrace change, if you're willing to stay relevant with your skills, and you have the confidence and you can jump right back in and overtake everyone else. And with that philosophy is how I have gone by. I've had to sit out of a couple of those laps, but no regrets whatsoever. So I will just sum up by saying that high performance, of course, was one theme, but it's very closely linked to high performance and what it takes for women to deliver that high performance. I'm going to stop at that. I'm conscious of time. I don't know if I'm going to be allowed, if there are any questions in the audience. Oh, I see a couple. I don't know if 2 questions. Okay. Yes, please.
First of all, hi. And it's a fellow VJTI alumnus, so hi.
Hello.
And I'm a mechanical engineer from there.
Okay.
Secondly, I wanted to ask, a lot of people talk about inclusivity, but they actually put in policies that are gender blind. In the sense that, oh, we will not see men or women, we'll have the same policies. But people don't understand that women actually need policies that specifically cater to them.
Yeah.
And what you were talking about earlier, that this translates into, let's say, parental leave and not maternity versus paternity,
yes,
etc. Yes. And that actually impacts women even further because
yeah.
gender-neutral policies or gender-blind policies make it even worse for women.
I
what
know,
do you think of these?
It's very hard. There's no right or wrong in that. In fact, we just increased paternity leave in Kpmg as well. How long it is? It is now 3 weeks. Oh, we want more, is it? No, so, but I agree to your point that it is some of these gender-neutral policies do more harm. The point is to be, while policies are at one level, and I do believe policies need to be gender agnostic because you're running an organization where performance has to be the top criteria. The key is to be sensitive, to recognize and acknowledge what is it that the women need and what are those few things they need a little differently. Someone spoke of networking earlier today. In the corporate world, that's a big challenge. That is not easy. You really, for most women, I mean, so many years at the workplace, but I still have to run home, not because I don't have support system, but there's a part of me that feels good when I have put the dinner on the table. That I will still take a 6 a.m. flight instead of traveling the previous night because I'd like to maximize my time at home. But how does one encourage and help those other enabling things? How does one help networking? How do you look at a lot that was spoken about women are a little diffident. When there is an announcement to take on a new role, they'll be among the last to put their hand up. How do you kind of evoke that confidence to say, you can do it, go out there? Why is it that you don't see enough of that happening? So there are a bunch of enablers which I would not call policies. These are interventions needed to enable and to see what are those specific needs that women have and how can we help that. And that needs to happen alongside at different things at different levels in one's career.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Ramya. I'm from SCMS school, SCMS college.
Yes.
The question to you is, so what do you think that what are the main challenges that you're facing as an entrepreneur? One or two main
challenges as an entrepreneur?
Yes.
So we work with a lot, and I'll talk as a consultant now, because I haven't yet to start my own entrepreneurial journey, hopefully someday soon. But when we work with organizations, I think a large part, there are some fantastic ideas. We do a lot of work with the startup community and ecosystem out of Bangalore. Brilliant ideas, but the challenge quite often is on the scale up.
Okay.
So what does it take to scale up, which is a combination of things, which is not just elements of funding, but the commercial aspects of scale up, aspects of the organization, getting the right people and the right talent in, are top of the mind few that I could think of. Because the scale up is where we don't see it happen. It kind of doesn't go to that next level.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, on that note, I'm sticking to my 2 questions. But thank you very much. I'm looking forward to joining you back in the audience and listening to more stories and to our next speaker. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.